Hey, g'day and welcome back. Today in Australia we are now well past the 5% tipping point and electric vehicles are now starting to appear everywhere, and the take-up on EVs will accelerate rapidly. Globally there are now over 40 million electric and hybrid vehicles on the road. The International Energy Agency data shows that electric cars are booming, with global sales this year to jump to 14 million. Where are they in Australia, I hear you say, as we still don't see a lot of EVs about. It's just that Australia is many years behind. So what changes can we expect to see in Australia as electric vehicle penetration accelerates through 20 and 60% of all vehicles on the road? This will happen in the next 3 to 4 years. I'm driving around my town and I'm looking at all of the industries that currently support keeping motor vehicles on the road. There are petrol stations everywhere, and in some locations we have competing petrol stations right next to each other. There are new and second-hand car dealers, automotive repair centres. There are shops selling automotive spare parts and accessories, car wreckers. There are windscreen replacement facilities, tyre supply stores, clutch and transmission repairs. There are panel beaters to repair vehicles after collisions. Car dealers seem to be on every corner, either selling new vehicles or lower-cost second-hand. As electric vehicles take over, will all of these businesses still be viable in just 5 or 10 years' time? If we look back at the transition from horse and carts to the original Model T Ford, some viewers will remember these photos from a previous video showing the transition in New York from 1900 to 1913, during which time New York transitioned from 100% horse and carts to 100% petrol vehicles in just 13 years. Think of the industries that were transformed in that short period of time to support horse and carts. There would have been saddle makers, farriers to manufacture horseshoes, feedlots for feeding and watering your horse. There would have been parking facilities. There would have been people involved in picking up horse poo and keeping the roads clean. There were clothing manufacturers. There were also horse and cart service centres to fix wheels and manufacture new carts. Apparently buggy whips were a specialty product of that time. All of these industries had to transform quickly from 1900 to 1913 as petrol vehicles took over. Initially, there were no petrol stations at all. Very early motorists had to go to a pharmacy and purchase a product known as motor spirit, which I believe was some form of refined kerosene. There were no motor mechanics. Motorists had to fix their own cars. There were no tyre supply stores. All of these had to be created, and in many of them, of course, came from people who had been working servicing horses and carts, and who successfully made the transition to motor vehicles. There would have been many, however, who either would not accept the changes that were taking place, they resisted, hung on to the old ways, or they were just unable to compete in the new gas-powered economy. Now, how will this play out in Western economies? We only need to look at what has happened in Norway, where they are almost at 100% of all new vehicle sales being electric. This is 5 years ahead of when they thought petrol cars would be replaced. We are seeing the closure of petrol stations already. In just one state in Australia, New South Wales, there are already 1,000 closed and abandoned petrol stations, and the EV transition has really only just begun. It's becoming a problem as the cost to close each one of these is about $1.5 million for the rehabilitation of the land. In countries like Norway, where they are at over 85% of all new vehicles being electric, many petrol stations are also closing. Some have transformed into EV charging stations. However, because so many EVs can simply charge at home, there is not the need for as many EV charging points at service centres as there are petrol pumps today. The motor mechanics are still servicing the gas-powered cars. However, these are reducing in number as EVs do not require servicing in the same way or as frequently as gas-powered cars. Tyres are still in demand, but do you think they need clutch and transmission service centres anymore in Norway? And what do you think is happening to the value of second-hand petrol cars in Norway as everyone is now buying electric cars? The world's most popular electric vehicles today are the Tesla and BYD brands. Neither of these manufacturers support a dealership model. They sell online and service their cars directly at their own service centres. Electric vehicles require very little service. Here is the service schedule for my Tesla Model Y, and other than tyre rotation and replacement, it starts at the 2-year point with a brake fluid check. My old ICE vehicle required a service every 10,000 kilometres. Car dealers have relied on after-sales service of ICE vehicles to be the profit centre for their businesses. They can afford to make a minimal margin on the sale of a new car, as they can be sure of ongoing revenue streams from the after-sales service. This is known in the industry as service absorption. These car dealers, however, are not going to be part of the supply chain for much longer. Tesla and BYD sell directly, Ford are restricting their dealer model, and Mercedes in Australia has won a case recently brought on by their dealers that cuts the dealer out of the sales process. Where I live, in New South Wales, Australia, there are approximately 2,600 petrol stations. Petrol stations are the obvious contender for restructuring as more and more electric vehicles replace petrol vehicles. Will we still need all of the petrol stations that are currently in my geographical area? One by one, these petrol stations are going to have to transform to the new economy, or they will go out of business. We're seeing the green shoots of this transition for petrol stations, with a few of them now starting to install electric vehicle charging points. BP and Ampol in Australia seem to have recognised the need to make this transition. We are seeing electric vehicle charging stations appearing throughout the country. In some parts of the world, entrepreneurs are building charging stations that include restaurants and restroom facilities. Elon Musk said that Tesla will be building some specialist charging facilities, and that this could be a whole new line of business for Tesla. If your gas-powered car is one of the few still on the roads in, say, 10 years' time, do you expect that all of the service stations that you see today will still be operating? Do you expect that the price of petrol will be the price it is today? We have been told that it will still be possible to buy petrol in 30 years' time. I think some people, though, are expecting they will simply be able to pull into a petrol station as they do today. Reality that's more likely, though, is they will have to drive quite some distance to one of the few remaining service stations that are still available, and the price of gas could be anything, let's say $20 a litre. Why will it be so expensive? Well, because the cost of extracting oil, shipping that oil around the world, refining that oil, distributing it to a petrol station, and then dispensing it to just a few remaining motorists will be as expensive as it is today. But that total cost will be divided amongst just a tiny number of consumers. I think we can agree that companies selling tyres and consumables like windscreen wiper blades will still have a viable business with electric vehicles. But what about those car dealers and automotive mechanics? Electric vehicles do not require any form of mechanical servicing. They do not consume oil. They do not consume clutches and transmissions. So all of the mechanical repairs associated with a traditional gas-powered car are no longer required within electric vehicles. Electric vehicles still consume brake pads. However, the regenerative braking capability in an electric vehicle means that brake pads will probably last 3 to 4 times as long as they do on a gas-powered car. Let's also give some thought to panel beaters and windscreen repair service facilities. Modern electric vehicles are already proving to be much safer to drive than gas-powered cars. This is in part because electric vehicles have modern safety facilities such as adaptive cruise control, automatic braking, and in the case of Tesla, enhanced autopilot, and in quite a short period of time, full self-autonomous driving. It's extremely unlikely that two self-driving autonomous vehicles will ever collide into each other. Tesla's full self-driving software is already safer than a human driver. As automated safety features become more common and better, there will be vastly fewer collisions, so the number of panel beaters and windscreen repair stores is likely to rapidly decline. This leads me to think also that as autonomous vehicles are perfected and robo-taxis are introduced, the business of being a taxi service or an Uber driver is very likely to go away. As Tesla released their full self-driving software, it has the ability to transform over 1 million Tesla motor vehicles into unmanned robo-taxis virtually overnight, as these cars are already on the road. I'm sure there are viewers who will be skeptical of this and expect that full autonomous driving will be decades away. I'm of the opinion that momentum is building and that we will see full autonomy very soon. Driverless robo-taxis will replace traditional taxis and Uber drivers within the next several years. It's hard to imagine, however, this transition is accelerating quickly. A growing number of countries have banned the sale of new petrol-powered vehicles from 2035. A few have brought that forward to 2030, and in Norway they are bringing it forward to 2025. What will this mean for the businesses involved in supplying spare parts? Second-hand petrol-powered cars will still be available for a long time to come. I can envisage a situation not unlike Cuba, where they were cut off from the Western economy for many years. In Cuba, motorists had to be very innovative to keep their vehicles on the road, and as a consequence there are some classic motor vehicles still driving around on Cuban streets. Will we have a similar situation in Australia, where second-hand motor vehicles are plundered for spare parts to keep an ever-diminishing number of vehicles still on the road? Or will there be some government intervention at some point in the future, such as the United States had some years ago with the program they called Cash for Clunkers, the objective being to remove inefficient gas-guzzling cars from the streets? So we are living in fascinating times. I think if we were to drive along these same streets in just a few years' time, we will find that many of these car dealers and car service and maintenance businesses no longer exist, or they will have had to transform dramatically to service the overwhelming number of electric vehicles that will be on the streets by that time. If you agree or disagree, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. G'day and welcome to Steve's Tesla. This is my channel dedicated to electric vehicles and renewable energy. Subscribe now and let's drive.